Welcome to today's episode of This May Be a Bad Idea. This podcast, it's a conversation on bravery. It tells a story of everyday people who faced what felt like the impossible and still bravely leaped into the unknown. I'm your host, Nicole Butts, and I am thrilled to introduce my guest today, Elizabeth Bellardo. She is the founder and principal coach consultant of Good Works Endeavors. Elizabeth brings over 20 years of senior leadership experience at both the U.S. Agency for International Development and nonprofits, with a career that's defined by leading through crises, building high-performing teams, and advancing humanitarian impact at a global scale. Elizabeth's journey into humanitarian work began with a very simple but powerful question: how can I work towards the betterment of others? That question eventually led her to USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, where she then responded to some of the most deadly humanitarian crises, to include providing strategic leadership as a member of the disaster assistance response team in both Iraq and Haiti. So from her earliest days, Elizabeth has always been on the forefront of humanitarian action. Following the destruction of USAID, Elizabeth has decided to channel that wealth of experience and the skills that she learned through crisis management into coaching and consulting. She's now helping others navigate their own leadership journeys and finding purpose from chaos. Elizabeth, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. So in your own words, now that I've read all those things about your accomplishments, can you tell me, who is Elizabeth Bellardo? How did you come to be a humanitarian, change navigator, and C-suite whisperer?
Thanks, Nicole. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Really excited for this conversation. You know, growing up, I was in a household that was quite religious. And even though I don't see myself as religious now, there was always the focus on how can we help others and be good in society. So growing up in that context was really, I would say, foundational for me. I also had the great pleasure. My mom worked for United Airlines since she was 17 until she retired. So we were so fortunate to be able to travel. And this sort of combination instilled in me from a really early age a desire to look both beyond my immediate community, sort of globally, but also see how I was connected and see what I could do for the better. So a couple of formative experiences as I was growing up. I was able to go on a few trips internationally. So when I was in high school, I was able to go to South Africa. This was about 1995. So really in this moment got a sense of what a country could be sort of going through, sort of in early stages of looking at making some really foundational, structural, important changes for good. And it sort of instilled in me this idea of, I want to do something like this, but I had no idea. So I went to college, chose a college where I could study international affairs, do overseas trips, managed to go overseas twice in college, once to Senegal and once to France, then came out to Washington, D.C. for grad school after my undergrad, again, and not really sort of understanding how I could make this a career, what I could focus on. And so was fortunate enough to have several internships in the area, human rights, international development. By the time I got out of grad school, my first full-time salaried job, let's say, was at the nonprofit Interaction, working in the humanitarian unit there. And so that was my first sort of foray into humanitarian action. And it was a great exposure to me about the power of this idea of helping people when they need it most. Interaction is a membership organization. So the idea of power in collective action also carried through. And it's really where I fell in love with the work and the possibilities of doing that level of good work collectively with others, and sort of stuck with it sort of ever since. So that was over 10 years of Interaction, and then sort of switching to the government, but also working on humanitarian assistance.
Excellent. And I will say, I truly believe in the transformational change that can come through witnessing other people, how they live, how they thrive, what their struggles are, the fact that we aren't so different. And that is one thing that international travel just really, really gives you. I think it's just so incredibly important to embrace the cultures of others and see what is really possible and to really understand that. So, when I was thinking of guests for this podcast, I saw that you had started your new endeavor with Good Works Endeavors. And, I thought that it was a great fit. And just preparing for this interview, for the podcast, all it did was re-emphasize your willingness to help the collective good, to do better, to help people reach their goals, and to promote good leadership. And that is the leadership I saw you demonstrating every day, as a member of the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. It's what the members of USAID did. It was not easy work. And we saw humanity at its worst, and we saw humanity at its best. So your leadership and being able to guide people through that from your perspective of what you were doing there, I think that this is such a good, positive transition. And it's such a good fit. It's such a good fit. So one thing that we discussed was your deep international experience in working towards a better future, and also something that we termed experiential living. I probably should have looked it up and seen if it was actually a term, but I'm going to say we coined it, Elizabeth. And that is not necessarily having a designed plan for your life, not being like, I'm going to do this, and then when I'm this old, I'm going to do this, and then when I'm this old, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to move to this, and then I'm going to go to this school, and then I'm going to go to that school, and then I'm going to get this job. Not that it's a bad thing to have a plan, because I'm a person who believes in plans. I used to have plans all the time, but I also early on realized that my plans don't always come to fruition. And instead of changing my plan, I just kind of gave up on plans. I was like, I'm going to live the experiences that create the life I want to have and the life I want to live. And I feel like I have just a kindred spirit in that, in chasing what feels right and the opportunity to help others. So thank you for being brave, and thank you for doing that. So, all right, we're going to move on. Tell me a little bit about your journey into coaching. Why coaching? Why now? How did this come to be?
Yeah. And I love that experiential living. My whole life, I've just sort of looked around, seen what was possible and what felt right, and chosen as best I could. Never had that 5-year plan, but doing okay, I think, despite that.
I would agree with that, Elizabeth. I would agree. It's always such a hard question when people are like, what is your 5-year plan? I'm like, let me get back to you. But sorry, continue, Elizabeth.
No, it's good. I mean, maybe that did help me. When USAID was abolished earlier this year by the administration, that obviously it was very hard for me. Over 20 years in the humanitarian sector, so many sort of friends and colleagues, and not to mention the people receiving assistance, so significantly impacted. And sort of in that moment, I really had to reflect and think about sort of what I wanted, who I was and what was energizing me. And so the idea for coaching, I myself have benefited from at least 6 coaches now over my career. I was working with a coach, back in March to help me, figure out even a short-term plan, not a 5-year plan, but a short-term plan. How was I going to sort of navigate this like total upending of the industry that I had invested over 2 decades of my experience in? And so I stepped back from really the identity of myself as humanitarian, myself as leader. I stepped back from my ego of how much money I was making and, the budgets and the people and the teams that I was working with. And I asked myself, what is bringing me joy? What excites me? What do I like doing? And the answer there was working with people, helping them advance in their career, having one-on-one engagements with people. And so that is what led me to coaching. The other piece that I was really thinking about when I made this decision were, what is an area where I can make an investment that, let's say it doesn't fully work out, I don't love it, but I have made investment in new skills, new approaches, and a new way of thinking that is going to help me down the road. And very quickly, coaching arose as the type of thing. I knew the value of it from my own experience, but then also knew that if I could invest in these skills of helping people develop, helping leaders lead, that in the end, I myself would be transformed in skills that were, could be used in a variety of different ways.
And Elizabeth, you approached it sounds like to me, that with curiosity and an open spirit. And you were really looking for something that was going to make you better. Like if this works out, and everyone will give you all the contact details on how to get in touch with Elizabeth. If you
taking on new clients,
moving forward. But that is one of my mantras, is that, walk through life with curiosity and be accepting and open to the wonderful possibilities and the goodness that life can bring you. And that is, you are being the epitome of that right now. And one thing I do want to explain to our listeners today is, with the abolishment, the destruction, all the words for what happened to the U.S. Agency for International Development, there's been a lot of chatter and a lot of feedback that's been provided saying, oh, you can find another job. I mean, there's other jobs out there. I work in IT. It happens to me all the time. I work in the private sector. It happens to me all the time. But one thing I think it's really important to remember is that with the abolishment, with the destruction of USAID, went a whole entire sector of work. So it wasn't just an organization laying people off or cutting positions. And that is terrible. We are now walking a mile in so many people's shoes. But it was also the abolishment of a complete sector of work that people had invested their whole lives to. So if I were in IT, I could try to, transition to another company that does IT. But now we in the humanitarian sector, we in the international development sector, for many of us, that's no longer an option. So we are having to continue to step out in this life on faith that everything's going to get better. And so I just wanted to share that for anyone who's thinking, well, people lose jobs all the time. You'll get another job. This is a particularly difficult moment for anyone that was in the humanitarian or international development sectors. So kudos to you. Kudos to you, Elizabeth. I also want to touch on something that we mentioned before, and that is, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but how you were like, I know I am not going to be able to sit down and fill out 40 applications a month or a week. I just know that that is not going to get me to a place where I'm going to continue to find joy in the work that I do. So can you kind of touch on that? Because I think that that is something that a lot of people are struggling with, is the feeling that they should, that I want to do something else, but I should be filling out all these applications, and that is where I should be placing my energy.
Yeah, I mean, Nicole, this was my journey, and I very much needed to put my time and my energy into something that I could see as productive at the end of the day. And so for me, learning how to set up my own LLC, get my business license, do all of the sort of entrepreneurial things that I needed to do to get my job, my business started, that was a project for me to give me something to do and show outcome at the end, as well as sort of learning the new skills required in coaching. I'm, taking classes at Georgetown University, which are really great. I also knew about myself that sending 40 applications a week or a month and sort of hearing back from maybe one, if I was lucky, that would be really detrimental to just my own personal well-being. But also, my journey is not for everyone, and I have a lot of respect and support for people who are out there, working the system and looking for another job, and also staying in humanitarian assistance. I mean, we saw the U.S. goes funding about 50% of the industry. USAID had 10,000 staff. So we've got an industry that's now like cut in half, and you have a ton of qualified candidates for every single job. I'm hearing 100, 200, like 300, 400 highly qualified candidates for each single job. And so that's hard to stay in that grind and to try to go for those jobs. I definitely don't want to minimize the work that people are doing to stay in the industry. But for me, it was really important to find something that I had the power to control and take something into my own hands that I was responsible for. It was also kind of a leap there, because I've been working for organizations, someone else. I had the security of healthcare and a paycheck and retirement. And I stepped away from that. And that is scary to sort of take something into my own hands. But it was also a test to see what could I get for myself. I know what I'm able to deliver when I can go into an organization and step into a job and take that role on, when I have a number of people that I'm accountable for, who are responsible, who I'm responsible for. But I wanted to see, what can I do as my own boss, being accountable to just myself. And for me, that was also another reason why this was such an important, I'm still learning a lot, path on my journey.
That is so awesome. And this is a perfect segue into my next question for you. So as you are on this journey of entrepreneurship and to seeing just how far, trusting in yourself you can go, have you thought this may be a bad idea?
So I love the name of your podcast, first of all, because absolutely, maybe I think that I'm going to lowball it and say at least once.
Right.
At least, especially like here I am. I've just stepped away from in an industry where I had over 2 decades of experience. I was very experienced, and now I'm a novice. I'm coming in at the bottom, looking around, and this is hard. This change from knowing could do something in my sleep to having to really struggle to learn and change and adapt. That is hard, and that is a journey that I'm on every day. And in this economy, to start a small business when you're seeing sort of layoffs across the board and companies not wanting to invest in their people, looking at people as sort of disposable to get into a field that essentially is investment in people to do better in the organizations. Yes, scary. What have I done? But on the other hand, what keeps me going is those conversations I have with my clients where I'm really able to help them unlock some new thinking about themselves or their experiences, their work. Conversations with other coaches. I can tell you that the community of people that fundamentally wants to help people grow and learn and advance is a great community. I will also say the community of humanitarian responders, also great. People who just want to help people. So I've stepped from one. I refuse to say I've left.
You never leave it.
That community behind because it's part of me.
We never leave.
But I've joined another community, which is really lovely. And so that also helps in sort of answering the question, maybe, but this has been a great, excellent choice for me.
Wonderful. You totally answered the question. I think one thing when you're saying when we are stepping away from an investment in people, it feels like, not that that's not necessarily what's happening. I would say that we can reframe it to be now there's an opportunity to help that many more people who may have not turned to coaching because this is what they did. They were a subject matter expert. They've done it for a long time, or even I was just getting started. This has always been my plan. Now I have to relook at my plan. I have to reopen it and look at other possibilities and possibly retooling or doing something that may be outside of what I've done for a long time or outside of my plan. And I think coaching really helps us reframe what the possibilities are and what we can actually do. So Elizabeth, I think that you are in this at the perfect time. And, the C-suite whisperer, it is hard. I mean, to lead in really challenging times. And I think that is where we are. We are at challenging times. We are at times where there is massive changes for us as a country, for us as a world, for us as a people. And I think the smart industries will invest in their leaders to give them the tools that they need to manage this change. Because, I don't think anything could have, if we would have known then what we know now about the abolishment of USAID, I think we would have invested more in the leaderships there. You and I would have gotten special training to help us manage that change. And I think that, again, you're just doing this at the perfect time. And there is a lot of opportunity and possibilities out there. So again, anyone who's listening, all the opportunities, we all have to reframe. We all have to rethink. We all have to step into this new world again with curiosity and figure out how we're going to approach it.
I love that. Yeah. And definitely something I think about in terms of, my experience and how I'm able to bring that to people as coach. And also everything is a cycle, right? And we're in one phase of a cycle right now. And the other part of experiential living and sort of not planning is always to keep your eyes open for the opportunities where they are in the moment. And so just going in with that mindset of I'm looking for opportunities, whatever they look like, whatever the landscape looks like in that moment, helps with that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. You are, yes, being open to everything. So you touched real quickly on your role in dealing with crises and how that is affecting you in preparation for this new change, this new career for you. Can you tell us more about how being in the front lines of humanitarian crises in crisis management and crisis leadership has prepared you for this journey?
Yeah. So I've had the pleasure of working on a number of different crises, a number of different teams, so both in Washington, also deployed overseas in the nonprofit, as well as U.S. government. And I think the biggest thing it's taught me is how to adapt, look around to see what needs to get done, and just get it done. So in the crisis, you don't really have the luxury of spending a year and a half planning the best project. You've got maybe a few hours, maybe some information which you know is changing every day, and your best instincts based on your experience. And so if you think about how do you navigate a world where information changes all the time? The world feels like it's been pulled out from under you every day, and you need to adapt and change, and the thing you thought and planned and did last week doesn't apply next week or this week. So that's literally, I feel like, the world we're living in right now. And so to take that just sort of flexibility, quick action, willingness to acknowledge, admit, and quickly correct mistakes as learning and important, all of these things are coming together to help me sort of navigate this moment in time as I do my own shift professionally, but just thinking about also sort of personally where we are in America right now and the sort of resilience and approach that we need to bring. Sometimes it seems like to every day, it helps.
So, one thing that someone said is, we in the humanitarian assistance sector are doers. And I think that what you described is someone who takes calculated risks and is willing to take agile approaches to problem solving. And again, all wonderful traits for someone in coaching. I love that. So now we're going to pivot to the truly, truly fun part of this conversation. And that is, I've talked about why I think you're incredible. You've really laid the foundation for what your journey has been that's taken you to where we are. Why? What do you think has been your bravest moment? What has been the scariest thing for you that you just looked fear dead in the eye and you took that leap?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of this moment as well. And I know we've talked about it for the whole podcast, but the piece of it that I think was the most scary for me, and I touched on it a little bit before, was letting go of my identity and my ego and allowing myself to really make a choice that was separate from the story that I had told myself my whole life. I'm a humanitarian. I have worked in this field for over 20 years. I am at this level of leadership in the system. And to really let go of those ideas of who I was and open myself up to be a novice again, to be working on my own without the guarantee of a biweekly paycheck and healthcare coverage. I mean, taking that leap and investing in myself and choosing to see what I can do. This for me was my brave moment.
And what a brave moment it has been, Elizabeth. What a brave moment. So my last question for you is, what is your dream for this venture, for your moment of bravery? What is it that you want to achieve with it?
Oh, that's a great question. And you know that with my mindset of experiential living, not planning, and trying to be open to possibilities, I have not sort of set out for myself. I need to do this by this time and have this by this time. So I'm really trying to embrace this idea of learn everything I can, improve, see improvements, but take those risks. And as I fail, which I am absolutely going to do in small, medium, or large ways, use that as learning to keep me moving forward. So I could say my biggest goal is to not give up, to continue learning, to continue the hard work of this new venture. And I don't know where it's going to take me in a year, 2 years, 3 years, but to be open to whatever that looks like, and to not shy away from the hard or uncomfortable moments that I know I'm going to face.
This is audio, so I know you all couldn't hear me, but I made a heart to Elizabeth, because I think that speaks to the truth of experiential living, first of all, and also just, being open to greatness. And that is something that we should all be. And just because you don't make $1 million or $3 million doing something does not mean that it has not been a worthwhile endeavor. Because when we're being brave, we don't always succeed to what we think. But bravery is in the journey. It's not in the destination. So with that, Elizabeth, last words. Do you have any words of encouragement for others who are thinking of taking a leap, of who are thinking of making a change in their lives?
First of all, there is the most to learn and grow and experience in those big, scary moments. And as you just said, it's about the journey. It's not just about jumping off the cliff, but it's about falling and hurting yourself and getting back up and trying it again. So I would totally agree with you that it's about the journey. Also, don't be stupid. If something's going to kill you or put you into financial destitution in 2 weeks by making a decision, don't do that. But also don't plan 2 years for something that you think you want to do that might give you joy. Think about it. Think about your intuition, what your body is telling you, what your emotions and your spirit is telling you, and then just do it, and you'll be better off having tried, regardless of the outcome.
Truer words have never been spoken, Elizabeth. Truer words have never been spoken. Thank you so much for your time in joining me today in the early days of This May Be a Bad Idea. I thank you for your vulnerability, for your transparency, for sharing this part of you. I wish you the greatest success, everyone. Elizabeth Bellardo, Good Works Endeavors, Coaching, and C-Suite Whispering. So please do find her on LinkedIn and her website, and we will post her website in the link to the podcast. And thank you for being a guest, and I look forward to watching your journey of bravery. Everyone, walk in the world with curiosity. Don't be too fearful of fear. As Elizabeth said, sometimes the greatest rewards come from us taking those brave steps forward and recognizing that it is a journey, not necessarily a destination. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of This May Be a Bad Idea. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and tell your friends. Thanks. Bye.